People like Osho are ahead of their times. It is good that more and more young people are now reading his works, once said by K.R. Narayanan. Good evening, all. It's a great privilege to introduce myself. Myself, Karidonamot Sujit of D2 Zoology. Kuriakos Gregorius College, Pambadi, the Madithalashan Center for Human Empowerment, NSS, NCC, Ek Bharat Shresh Bharat, and IQAC, in association with K.R. Narayanan Chair for Human Rights and Social Justice, MG University, Kottayam, is kindly presenting a commemoration of Sri K.R. Narayanan. God answers every prayer. When the idea is not right, God is no. When the time has not arrived, God is slow. We have good plans for ourselves, but God has better plan for us. Before we further advance into today's program, let's remember our Almighty. Let's seek His blessing for the day. His life be with us till the end of the section. Let Him make us wise and pure from the sin and the vices keep us away. Now, I request Dr. Shaila Abraham, who is the college principal, to formally welcome the gatherings. Ma'am, please.
Dr. Coordinator Narayan Chair of University, three members of NSS, NCC, CDC, AGC, and Lesson Center of Physical Body, and all other participants. It's a great pleasure for me to be here and to extend a warm welcome to our gather here to commemorate the life of Sri K.R. Narayanan, our former President of India. My life is my message. This is the strongest message we ever heard by our Mahatma. We can present Dr. Narayan also as a model to motivate our youngsters. He proved that only education could ensure total eradication of all discrimination. Despite this all problems, his intellect won him the most respectable position, Rashtrapati of India. So, I think this program is work for this new generation. Today, we are blessed with a great personality, Sri Sahu. The right person can share the pure stories of Sri Narayanan, who served as his officer and special duty and press secretary. On behalf of everyone present here, with due respect, I warmly welcome you at this time. We also welcome Additional Master, Foreign Narayan Chair, Only Samsar. You are the more motivation spirit for this program. Plus, to welcome program officers and participants for the grant. Welcome you all. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am, for your honest welcome address. Once K.R. Narayanan said, education is the key to health and social progress. The fact is that the average expectation of life of an Indian has doubled since the independence. In fact, it is 61 years, now as against 28 or 30 years at the time of the independence. Now, let me invite Sri S.N. Sahu, who was the OSD and Press Secretary to Sri K.R. Narayanan. He was a student of collected works of Mahatma Gandhi and writings of Jawaharlal Nehru, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, Swami Vivekananda, and many of them, as served late Sri K.R. Narayanan, President of India, as officer on special duty and Press Secretary, and had a tenure as Director in Prime Minister's Office and as Joint Secretary in Rajya Sabha Secretariat. He has delivered numerous lectures in several prestigious educational institutions such as Central and State Universities, IIM Calcutta, IIM Lucknow, other prominent business schools, NITs, and colleges across the country. He has authored numerous articles on diverse subjects in print and digital platforms, and some of the recent articles are when K.R. Narayanan interviewed Mahatma Gandhi, revisiting Mahatma Gandhi in the context of COVID pandemic. Despite appropriating Netaji, the BJP continues to disagreed his secular, pluralist worldview. Now, he was adopt Gandhi's truthship for cause of labor, etc. He is teaching as a guest factuality in several units. Now, let me invite Sri Isim Sahu for the keynote address. Sir, please.
Are you able to hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, sir, you are audible.
Am I audible?
Yes, sir, you are audible.
Okay. Thank you so much, Madam Principal. The other distinguished participants, Dr. Bipin, Varghese, who actually contacted me, and my friends who are connected to this event through this digital platform. I'm extremely honored to get this opportunity to participate in this event and share some thoughts concerning Mr. Narayanan's worldview and particularly his enduring legacy in celebrating the idea of India and in defending it. Now, in 21st century, particularly in 2021 and 22, we have been confronting massive challenges to the idea of India and the ideals associated with the idea of India. And therefore, it is extremely important to recall the vision of Mr. K.R. Narayanan, who served as President of India, and during his tenure, actually he articulated certain values, certain ideals, which are at the core of our constitution and which are central to understand the idea of India. Now let me refer to his vision of India, which in fact he drew from his understanding of the history of Kerala. In fact, according to Mr. Narayanan, Kerala represented an idea which remained central to the idea of India, because in Kerala, for the first time in the history of India, Christianity arrived in Kerala in right 50 years after crucifixion of Jesus Christ. Islam also arrived in Kerala through trade and commerce around 5th, 6th century AD. And Hinduism was, of course, there. And therefore, Kerala represented that kind of microcosm of India, where all faiths coexisted, flourished, and gave that much needed example of diversity of faiths. And therefore, he, as a person from Kerala, as a Malayali, he could understand this aspect of Kerala history, and therefore could enlarge it in the context of India to explain the idea of India. After he assumed the office of the President of India on 25th July 1997, and next year, that is on 14th August 1998, in an interview to Mr. N. Ram, he was asked that question about idea of India by Mr. Ram, how that idea of India was being, taking shape, and what kind of challenges it faced, and what are the, solutions that he could come up with. Mr. Narayanan said that there is an overarching idea of India. There are several streams which are rooted in diversities of India. And therefore, within that overarching scheme of idea of India, several opposing and contradictory viewpoints could flourish. And therefore it was important that such an idea of India should be carried forward without imposing any kind of uniformity, without determining and deciding the identity of idea of India in terms of one religion, one language, or one kind of personality. So, that kind of elaboration and explanation of the idea of India in terms of complexities, in terms of diversities, in terms of multiple languages, literally constituted an attempt to celebrate the idea of India, which is associated with multiple faiths, multiple languages, multiple ethnicities, and so on and so forth. That idea of India, which was enshrined in the Constitution, in fact, prompted him to defend that idea, because as the President of India, the President takes an oath to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution. The oaths taken by the President and governors are quite different from the oaths taken by the Prime Minister or the other Council of Ministers. The President and the Governor, they take the oath to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution. Whereas Prime Minister, Chief Ministers, they take the oath to owe allegiance to the Constitution. So by acting in tune with the oaths that he took to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution, he was defending the idea of India. And in a way, he could defend in such a manner that attempts to review the Constitution was abandoned by Prime Minister Bajpayee. Prime Minister Bajpayee, in fact, outlined a proposal to review the Constitution, and he put that idea in President Narayanan's speech, which he delivered in the Parliament. That speech of the President, which is delivered by the President in Parliament, is not prepared by the President. It cannot be altered by the President as well, unless those alterations are approved by the Cabinet. So he delivered that speech in Parliament, which was prepared by the Prime Minister's office, that the government of Bajpayee was supposed to review the Constitution. So therefore, President of India was in a way bound by those utterances he made in Parliament through that text of the speech which was prepared by Prime Minister's office. But Mr. Narayanan, he exercised the oath that he took to differ from that idea. So he suggested in another speech on the occasion of the Golden Jubilee of our Republic in the Central Hall of Parliament, he said, let us examine whether the Constitution has failed us or we have failed the Constitution. Those articulations of Mr. Narayanan on the occasion of the Golden Jubilee of our Republic reverberated throughout the country. And then Mr. Bajpayee was persuaded by right-thinking people to pay heed to the wise words of President Narayanan and abandon that idea to review the Constitution. So instead of reviewing the Constitution, Mr. Bajpayee appointed a commission, Justice Venkayat, under the chairmanship of Justice Venkayat Chalaya, not to review the Constitution, but to review the working of the Constitution. Because Constitution embodied the idea of India, its diversities, the multiplicity of languages, the unity within these diversities, and the idea that India is a union of states. So such a remarkable idea which was embodied in the Constitution of India was defended by Mr. Narayanan, and therefore he, according to his suggestions, instead of reviewing the Constitution, a commission was appointed to review the working of the Constitution. So that is what, he could defend the idea of India. Now his idea of India was rooted in, his understanding that different aspects of the idea of India, secularism, pluralism, the idea of equality and equal opportunity, the freedom guaranteed under the constitution, etc., etc., they also need to be defended, because defense of idea means defense of those aspects which actually remain at the core of the idea of India. And what was that core? Core was to celebrate pluralism, celebrate multiculturalism, celebrate confluence of cultures, confluence of civilizations, celebrate the point that there is some kind of unity within the diversities of India. And those diversities were bewildering, delightful, and at the same time affirming the oneness or the unity of India. So this is a great thing which stands in contrast to the vision of some of the organizations of India, particularly the ruling leadership, which has understood India in terms of one nation, one culture, and some kind of oneness only. This is called cultural nationalism. One nation, one culture. This kind of understanding of India is contrary to the idea of India. India can never be, understood in terms of one culture, because there are a variety of cultures. Cultures in south of India, Dravidian culture, the cultures associated with, Kerala, which cannot be defined in terms of one religion alone. The cultures in northeastern part of India, that cannot be fitted into any one particular faith or religion or creed, or for that matter, culture which is prevalent in western part of India, or for that matter, eastern part of India. So to say that India has one culture and therefore there should be one nation, should have one culture, is to militate, is to go against the very idea of India. It is such kind of understanding which Mr. Narayanan reflected in his numerous articulations, his speeches, in his messages. So we see, for instance, today the ruling leadership of India, Prime Minister Modi, and some of his ministers, some of the BJP leaders, they are continuously attacking the idea of secularism. See, for instance, some of the ministers, they clearly state that one should never be secular, one should be, celebrate the affiliations to caste or to religion. But when one affiliates oneself to secularism, then how does one understand that person? It was stated by one BJP minister of Karnataka. Similarly, the governor of Maharashtra, he was ridiculing secularism and challenging, the present chief minister, Mr. Uddhav Thackeray, that why he didn't open the temples during pandemic. Was he trying to prove his secular credentials by closing the temples? Now, these are these kind of bizarre articulations that you find in independent India, denigrating secularism, ridiculing secularism. Now, Mr. Narayanan, he took a position, when he was a minister of state in Rajiv Gandhi government, he delivered a speech in Kashmir University. It's called Secularism in a Religious Society. He said that in a religious society, it was very tough to establish a secular state, which would keep equidistance from all religions, all faiths. And he quoted Jawaharlal Nehru. And Mr. Nehru, in one of his interviews with a French intellectual, André Malraux, he was asked by Mr. Malraux a question. Mr. Nehru, what would you find the most difficult thing to do in India? And Nehru said, to create a secular state in a religious society, and to create a just society by employing just means. So Mr. Narayanan said that it was very difficult to create a secular state in a religious society. Our society is deeply religious, be it society of Tamil Nadu or Kerala or for that matter Odisha or Bengal or UP or for that matter Rajasthan, wherever you may go, within the territory of India. So that secular state is now getting more aligned with, religion, religious practices, even rituals associated with majority, the faith of the majority people. I mean, what did Prime Minister do in Kashi when he was launching the Kashi Corridor project? He himself was associating with the religious practices and ritualism associated with the faith of the majority people. When he, laid down the foundation of the, Ram temple in Ayodhya, the full display of religious practices of, the people pursuing the, Hindu faith. This kind of dissociation of state from, because Prime Minister is he occupies a constitutional office. Prime Minister himself represents the state. If he remains engaged in, such kind of, ritualism, then obviously an impression is created that state is associated with the faith of the majority people. So that's what Mr. Narayanan was challenging. He was telling, even as a minister in the Rajiv Gandhi cabinet, that if people occupying high positions, people with high level of educational qualifications, if they follow such practices, then secularism would be in danger. And when secularism would be in jeopardy, then the idea of India would be put at stake. So therefore, he suggested one method, and that method was comprehensive practice of social modernization. Social modernization, which is an idea which is hardly talked about. People talk about industrial modernization, economic modernization, technological modernization, but how to change society, how to change the attitude of the people along progressive lines, that is social modernization. Mr. Narayanan was one of the great leaders of public life who frequently talked about social modernization. Now, social modernization means broadening the outlook, expanding our outlook, remaining committed to liberal values and eschewing the practices which has nothing to do with science or nothing to do with, secular values. Now, therefore, today what is required in India is this emphasis on social modernization to defend the idea of India. And therefore, today, for instance, Prime Minister, or some of the chief ministers, even they are so closely associating themselves with this ritualism, with the religious practices, which has nothing to do with science, which has nothing to do with constitutional morality or constitutional values. So Mr. Narayanan's prescription for social modernization to uphold secularism is a method to defend the idea of India, which he defended in his own way, through his articulations and through his own method of leading a life in tune with constitutional morality, not in tune with the religious practices. So this is one of the wonderful lessons one can derive from Mr. Narayanan's life. On another occasion, while delivering a speech on the eve of independence, he said, struggle for women's rights is a struggle for secularism. Now, it's a remarkable interpretation he gave, that, when we struggle for women's rights, it is a struggle for secularism. Because secularism means, in the context of India, respecting all faiths equally and dissociation of the state from all religions. This is secularism. Or, equal respect for all faiths and equal space for all faiths. Now, today, when in Karnataka, girls are not being allowed to attend classes in college or educational institutions because they prefer to wear a particular dress, where in law is written that girls suppose or boys wear a particular dress, they should not be allowed to enter the classes. It is contrary to the secular values. If secularism means equal respect for all faiths, then why they are prevented? Now this is what, so because in every religion, equal respect or equal space is not given to women. So therefore, by struggling to defend secular values, we literally struggle to defend women's rights, women's equality, and women's empowerment. Now, this is a beautiful interpretation given by Mr. K.R. Narayanan in one of his speeches, which need to be kept in mind. So, for instance, the other example I wanted to give from his life, when Babri Mosque was demolished on 6th December 1992, he described, at that time he was the Vice President of India, and while presiding over Rajya Sabha, he said, destruction of the Babri Masjid was the greatest tragedy India faced after the assassination of Mahatma Gandhi. So such a profound observation he made, drawing parallel between assassination of Mahatma Gandhi and destruction of Babri Masjid. In other words, the idea or the ideology and the people who assassinated Mahatma Gandhi also remained a devastating force behind the destruction of Babri Masjid. Now, if that kind of assault on Babri Masjid was, he could see, that was a danger to the idea of India, because Gandhi represented that idea of India. So therefore, those observations are very powerful observations which need to be quoted quite often, to defend the idea of India and the secular values and religious pluralism. Having said this, now let me come to the other aspects, of Mr. Narayanan's legacy, and that aspect is, in terms of his understanding of the values of freedom struggle represented by, Gandhi, Nehru, and Ambedkar. In Kerala Assembly, there are three statues, one of Gandhi, the other of, Nehru, the other of Ambedkar. Now, in one of his brilliant writings on Ambedkar, Mr. K.R. Narayanan said that, if Mahatma Gandhi gave a mass dimension and moral purpose to freedom struggle, Nehru gave a socialist and economic dimension, and Ambedkar gave a challenging democratic dimension. Now, in one sentence, he synthesized the vision of India embodied in the thoughts of Gandhi, Nehru, and Ambedkar. Now, today in 21st century India, particularly during last few months, we have witnessed a very sorry state of affairs involving vilification of Mahatma Gandhi, glorification of the assassins of Gandhi, and of course, blood-curdling call for genocide of Muslims and call for arms to execute that genocide. Now, it is in this situation that we need to juxtapose, as Mr. Narayanan did, the thoughts of Gandhi, Ambedkar, and Jawaharlal Nehru, and therefore we need to replay their ideas, reenact their ideas to fight these tendencies, they fight these forces which are out to devastate the constitutional morality, constitutional values, and the ethos of our freedom struggle. Therefore, we need to revisit Mr. Narayanan's, articulations, his speeches, his writings, his thoughts, which are embodied in such great in his life and work. The other point I wanted to flag is that Mr. Narayanan, in one of his messages which he issued on the occasion of New Year 2000, he normally President of India, they issue a greeting card, a formal greeting card, conveying greetings and good wishes to the people of India and to his near and dear ones on the occasion of the New Year. But in the year 2000, Mr. Narayanan wanted to give a different kind of message through his greeting card, New Year greeting card. So what he did, he asked me to find out that observation of Nehru on science and philosophy, which was there in the Discovery of India, authored by Jawaharlal Nehru, the first Prime Minister of India. Then he took that quotation, used it in the inner cover page of the greeting card, and in the inner cover page there is a picture of Jawaharlal Nehru and Albert Einstein. Under that picture, Mr. Narayanan used that quotation of Nehru. And what did Nehru say? Nehru said, there would be in future an alliance between science and philosophy. And out of that alliance would emerge scientific humanism. This is a great quote of Jawaharlal Nehru, that there would be an alliance between science and philosophy. And out of that will emerge scientific humanism. And what was essential for humanity, for India, and for every sections of Indian society is that scientific humanism. So look at Mr. Narayanan, he defended secularism, he defended our constitution, now he promoted scientific humanism articulated by the first Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru in his book Discovery of India. Now, therefore, if you look at it, India has to be seen not only in terms of its ancient civilization, India has to be seen in terms of its secular credentials, India has to be seen in terms of its, culture, of a culture which is embodied in the idea of confluence of civilizations. India has to be seen in terms of an alliance between science and philosophy. And the byproduct of alliance between science and philosophy would be scientific humanism, defining aspects of the idea of India. Now, this scientific humanism, today nobody talks about. When we talk of, when the Prime Minister, could summon the courage to say that in ancient India there was a plastic surgeon represented by a human head, on the elephant head on the body of a human, that is Ganesh, So, and then he was saying that there was plastic surgery, and some people claim that there was internet during Mahabharata era. Otherwise, how did Sanjay could communicate what was happening in the battlefield to, the king, the king in the, who was getting the happenings that was there in the battlefield. Such kind of weird, unscientific ideas based on superstition, ideas based on mythology but not history. Mythology could be a good source for philosophy, but it cannot be treated as history. So therefore, Mr. Narayanan's advocacy of scientific humanism, in 2000, in his greeting card for the year 2000, assumes enormous significance for India, which is now confronting an avalanche of, ideas rooted in superstition, rooted in ritualism, rooted in unscientific propositions, and so on and so forth. So therefore, to defend the idea of India, or to celebrate the idea of India, we need to have both science and humanism, apart from our values rooted in ancient culture and civilization. The other aspect of Mr. Narayanan, was to understand history in a correct perspective. not to weaponize history. You see, today the ruling elite of India, they are weaponizing history. This weaponization of history is a dangerous thing, to spread poison across the generations of society. See, for instance, history, the other day, the Defense Minister of India said, made a very preposterous claim that it is because of Gandhi, that Savarkar submitted mercy petitions. It was absurd. Gandhi nowhere, wrote that Savarkar should submit mercy petitions. Now, so this kind of weaponization of history to settle scores, with not only historical personalities, but with the present, settle scores with the present, is very, very dangerous. So therefore, Mr. Narayanan, in his message to the Indian History Congress, which is a remarkable message, he quoted the judgments of, the judgment of the Bombay High Court, where it was pronounced that to use history as a handmaiden of politicians is to do incalculable damage, to the generations who will be imbibed those distorted lessons from history. So such a message was issued by Mr. Narayanan when he was president of the Indian History Congress, and that's a very great message which runs into 2 pages. That message was circulated in the Indian History Congress as a pamphlet. So today the same thing is happening. For instance, history is being distorted. History is being projected in terms of binaries. When Prime Minister went to launch the Kashi Corridor project, he was projecting, a binary involving, Shivaji and Aurangzeb. He said if there was Aurangzeb, Shivaji could emerge. And now in UP elections, history is being distorted. To get the votes of the Jats, the Home Minister is saying that there is a 600-year-old history of BJP and Jats to fight the Mughals. This is a bizarre interpretation. BJP is a 40-year-old party. How it goes beyond understanding as to how it had a 600-year-old history of fighting against the Mughals. In fact, Jats had never a very bitter history of fighting against Mughals. It is the Rajputs who had a history of fighting against Mughals, and Marathas who had a history of fighting against Mughals. So how the ruling elite is using history as its handmaiden to settle scores, to address, to polarize people. So this kind of tendencies Mr. Narayanan in his message to the History Congress described as very dangerous. So therefore, again, this legacy of Narayanan to correctly understand history and interpret it and caution, to the present generation that if history could be misinterpreted, it would be very dangerous for society. Now, we are confronting a dangerous situation. See, today, through the, by peddling falsehood, fake narratives of history, incalculable, a lot of damage is being done. So therefore, we need to be mindful of such approaches, which are demonstrated in a wonderful manner in some of the articulations of Mr. K.R. Narayanan. The other point I wanted to tell you is that, again, in the context of history, Mr. Narayanan was one president who took a very strong stand, against even politicizing Bharat Ratna, the highest civilian honor. See, today, Lata Mangeshkar, a colossus in the history of music, a colossus in the history of playback singing. She was conferred Bharat Ratna by Mr. K.R. Narayanan as the President of India. And Mr. Narayanan wanted to, wanted that Bismillah Khan, the Sehnai Master, should be conferred with Bharat Ratna, the highest civilian honor. When he proposed that proposal, when he sent that proposal to Prime Minister Bajpayee for conferring Bharat Ratna on Bismillah Khan, Mr. Bajpayee accepted that proposal, but he recommended Mr. V.D. Savarkar's name for Bharat Ratna. Mr. Narayanan set over the proposal for a few months. And when he went to greet Mr. Bajpayee on his birthday on 25th January 2001 or 2002, Mr. Bajpayee told Mr. President, "Sir, you suggested Bismillah Khan's name and we agreed that he should be conferred with Bharat Ratna. And I suggested," he said, Mr. Bajpayee said, "I suggested Savarkar's name and the file is pending with you. You have not cleared it, you have not sent it back. I think you are inclined not to approve my proposal for Bharat Ratna for Savarkar. And because you are not inclined to approve my proposal, so I withdraw the proposal for Bharat Ratna for Savarkar." So Mr. Narayanan, because he set over the file, Mr. Bajpayee understood the message. He withdrew the proposal. And eventually, Mr. Savarkar was not conferred Bharat Ratna. But look at the politicization of Bharat Ratna. BJP, while issuing the manifesto for Maharashtra elections 2.5 years back, in that manifesto they mentioned that if BJP would come back to power, would get mandate of the people to form government in Maharashtra, they would confer Bharat Ratna on Savarkar. Now, Bharat Ratna cannot be dependent on the election victory of a political party. Bharat Ratna is given on the merits of the person, not on the basis of the victory of a particular political party. Now, this kind of attempt even to politicize Bharat Ratna, in vis-a-vis Savarkar, who was rejected Bharat Ratna by Mr. K.R. Narayanan, the President of India, that shows the stature of Mr. Narayanan to keep Bharat Ratna above politics. So this is the idea of India, where awards and honors cannot be politicized. History cannot be politicized. History cannot be reduced to a handmaiden, and so on and so forth. So these aspects are there. We need to discuss, disseminate. We need to educate people about this legacy of Narayanan. And this legacy is integrally associated with the idea of India, which is now getting endangered by diabolical forces representing a regressive idea of cultural nationalism. Recently Mr. Rahul Gandhi said, India is not a nation but a union of states as enshrined in the Constitution. He was attacked. Now, this idea that India is not a nation was also reflected by Mahatma Gandhi in 1941 in his constructive program, when he said it would be very difficult to claim that India is a nation because we have so much of varieties, and then there is no sensation of nationalism among all components of our country about which we do not know. Same thing was stated by Mr. Ambedkar in the Constitutional Assembly in his last speech. He said, he said that to acknowledge that we are not a nation would be better for us because we will strive to make India as a nation. He said, India with a variety of castes and then divided by all kinds of primordial identities cannot conceivably be considered as a nation because we are all living in isolated, pockets in terms of caste or community or religion. So therefore he was talking about, he said castes are international. So he talked about constitutional morality. And constitutional morality would bind this nation, not the caste morality or religious morality. So therefore, exactly the same thing Mr. Narayanan said in one of his speeches, that the constitutional values, constitutional morality, our civilizational values, they will integrate India. apart from political integration, there must be economic integration, which was earlier reflected through planning process and so on and so forth. And therefore, such processes for economic equality, equality of opportunity, and guaranteeing of the freedoms enshrined in the Constitution. These are the aspects which need to be, understood, need to be emphasized to defend the idea of India. Now I will conclude by his great statement which he made in response to Samuel Huntington's theory of class of civilizations. Mr. Narayanan said, civilizations never class. It is barbarians who class. Civilizations come together to form confluences. India is a standing refutation of the class of civilizations and a testimony to the idea of confluence of civilizations. So this confluence of civilizations remain at the heart of idea of India. And we all need to contribute to this confluence of civilizations by harnessing ideas from the legacy of Mr. K.R. Narayanan. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. You will learn to fight your fear and negative thought when you are motivated. Motivation can help professionals to be positive and happy while working hard to achieve goals. When you are mentioned, you learn or organize and prioritize your life. Now, let me invite Dr. Rajesh Kamath, who is the coordinator of K.R. Narayanan Chair, for the presidential address. Sir, please.
Yeah, I'm extremely sorry to note that I was not able to, log on time. There was a technical issue, but I was, listening the excellent, memory that has been talked about K.R. Narayanan, the former President of India. We are extremely proud as members of the Mahatma Gandhi University to remember and spread the message or the legacy of K.R. Narayanan, because K.R. Narayanan basically hailed from very close to our university. He is from Baro, only 13 kilometers away from our university. So K.R. Narayanan Chair has been set up to do, research as well as, spread the legacy of his democratic values, and that has been on the way. Of course, the COVID-19 have made a lot of problem to do the work well. But today, we all have, listened about his contributions as a defender of Indian Constitution. That was the central thrust of S.N. Sahu's talk, and many instances has been drawn from his writings and speeches, because S.N. Sahu sir was very closely associated with K.R. Narayanan in the capacity of the press secretary and also in personal way. So we are extremely happy and we are extremely endowed with such a personality to have us today to remember K.R. Narayanan, and I am extremely happy, and we would definitely, in association with the college and the university, we would plan to, conduct an offline meeting, offline gathering in the memory of K.R. Narayanan, for which we are looking for a better time to do that. So with these words, I actually express my gratitude to S.N. Sahu sir, because on short notice, he has agreed us to deliver this speech, and fortunately today, Sunday was a day for him. he was a little less busy today because I was informed that tomorrow he's having another program and so forth. So on behalf of the college as well as the Mahatma Gandhi University, I extend my gratitude to you, sir. So looking forward you to again to be associated with this chair and the college functions about K.R. Narayanan and his ideas, and we will think about the possible ways of publishing some of his unique ideas of India, ideas of defending democracy, defending constitution, and upholding the social justice and democratic values. And also, we would seek help from you to, to pen down his, childhood kind of a biographical sketch, so that we can publish either on the website or in the form of a pamphlet on behalf of the university. So I thank you so much for accepting our invitation and for a wonderful and excellent articulation on K.R. Narayanan and the idea of India. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. It was amazing, and the time goes by so fast. It's time to interact with Sri S.N. Sahu. If there's anyone having any doubt, they can unmute their mic and can ask questions. Or they can pin a message on their chat box. If there are anyone, please. Okay, I thought there is no one. Thank you, sir, for being with us during your busy schedule. Not last but least, let me invite Ms. Shalu Marian George, who is the student member of IQAC, for the vote of thanks. Shalu?
Am I audible?
Yes, you are audible.
Okay. Respected Dr. Rajesh Komnath sir, esteemed guest, Sri S.N. Sahu sir, Principal Dr. Shaila Abraham ma'am, teachers and friends. Independent India has had 14 presidents, but none as close to Malayalis' hearts as Sri K.R. Narayanan sir, who from a very small village in Udugur rose to becoming India's 10th president. In fact, one among the most finest presidents India has ever had, a true defender of the constitution in every sense. And as Keralites, I believe it's most important that we remember K.R. Narayanan sir, his life and contribution, especially as we celebrate India's 75th year of independence. Following that, this evening, as we've come to the end of the session, it commemorated K.R. Narayanan sir's life, his contributions as a defender of the constitution organized by the Bharatheeyam program of KG College and the K.R. Narayanan Chair for Human Rights and Social Justice, MG University, Kottayam. It is now time to thank everyone who has contributed to the smooth conduct of this event. First of all, extending sincere gratitude to Coordinator of Mahatma Gandhi University's K.R. Narayanan Chair for Human Rights and Social Justice, Dr. Rajesh Komnath sir, who presided over the meeting. Your talk is insightful, sir. We're glad we could associate with you and looking forward for more such fruitful collaborations with the chair. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much.
I would like to thank our keynote speaker, Sri S.N. Sahu sir. We really cannot ask for a better person than you, sir. Your talk had a profound impact on us. It was well articulated. I'm sure your words will definitely stay with us for a very long time. Also, especially since you're a very busy person and someone who has delivered lectures in many premier institutions across the country, we find ourselves extremely humbled that you spared so much of your time for us. Thank you very much for joining us. On behalf of the entire KG College family, I extend sincere gratitude to you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, let me thank our principal, Dr. Shaila Abraham ma'am, who is a constant source of motivation, encouragement, and support. Thank you, ma'am. On that note, I would like to specially appreciate, congratulate, and thank Marathalashan Center Coordinator and NSS Program Officer, Dr. Vipin K. Varghese, sir, IQAC Coordinator and Associate NCC Officer, Lieutenant Renish Joseph, sir, NSS Program Officer Archana Kardamis, EBSP Coordinator Priyamis, whose coordinated efforts, hard work, has brought out the best of this session. Thank you very much. Special thanks to NCC Cadet Donamal Sujit for gracefully handling this session. Also, I'd like to thank our attendees, both teachers and students who found time to join in. Thank you very much. Once again, I conclude by extending sincere gratitude to one and all gathered here. Thank you.
Thank you, Shalu. Once again, thank you and good night. Let's leave the meet.
Good evening, Satya.
Good evening, sir. Good evening, guys.
Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.